Так, друзі, привіт-привіт. Дякую, що приєдналися до нашого вебінару. З вами ми з goodjob. Ви мене, на жаль, не бачите через технічні складнощі, але я рада вас бачити всіх в чаті. Бачу, що дуже багато людей з Києва. Всім привіт. Раді, що ви тут з нами на другому вебінарі від goodjob та Canva. Сьогодні ми будемо говорити про PVP, про вашу ціннісну пропозицію. Я знаю, що для багатьох, напевно, це було такий термін чути вперше, але я дуже рада, що ви всі тут, тому що насправді сьогоднішній майстер-клас буде неймовірно корисним для всіх нас. І я тоді передаю слово нашим гостям, нашим партнерам з Canva, і будемо розпочинати вебінар. Thank you so much for joining. I've just explained that we're very happy to see you. We're very happy to have you all here on the masterclass on PVP with goodjob and Canva. My name is Donna, and I will be giving the word for our partners to Canva. Erін, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Donna, for the lovely intro. Hello, everyone, and a massive thank you to everyone for joining us today. This is our second webinar in our Job Seeker Masterclass series with goodjob, and we are so excited to be spending some time with you all each week this month. Some of you may have joined us last week for our Building a Standout CV Masterclass. If you weren't able to make it, definitely recommend going back and watching the recording. But if you're joining us again, welcome back. And if you're here for the first time, nice to meet you. My name is Eryn. I'm part of the talent acquisition team at Canva, and we've been working very closely with our friends at goodjob to pull together this masterclass series to share with you all. Very soon, I'm going to hand over to my brilliant teammates, Annie and Mike, who have an exceptional masterclass on identifying, crafting, and communicating your personal value proposition to share with you all today. And they'll also be sharing a take-home workbook with you all at the end of the session. You'll also be joined by my teammates, Aaron, Chris, and Camille. And we'll all be in the Q&A answering your questions. So feel free to send through any questions you have down below in the Zoom Q&A. We'll do our best to answer them, but make sure you pop your questions in the Q&A, not the chat. We may miss any questions that come through in the chat. So always pop them in the Q&A if you can. We really hope this month of masterclasses are making you feel empowered to confidently tackle your job search. We know many of you are searching for new roles in new countries, new industries, and new cultures. And that can be pretty intimidating and overwhelming at the best of times. Like billions of people around the world, we at Canva are shocked and heartbroken to see the continued war crimes and the loss of thousands of innocent lives as Russia continues its illegal war in Ukraine. We stand vehemently opposed to the Russian government's continued acts of aggression, and we're committed to standing for peace and safety everywhere. So a few months ago, our talent acquisition team started brainstorming ways we could support the Ukrainian job seeker community during this challenging time. It was then that we met our very good friends at goodjob, and an amazing partnership was born. It truly means the world to us to be able to show our support for Ukraine and work with this truly incredible team to provide these resources to you all. Now, while some of you may know who Canva are, especially if you joined us last week, if you're new here, you may not be so familiar with us. So let's do a quick recap and intro on Canva before we get into an amazing presentation from the team. We are a visual communication platform with a mission to empower the world to design. Our goal is to make design accessible to anyone, anywhere, to create anything they like. We're a values-driven company. The values that are appearing on your screens are at the lifeblood of every decision and every interaction at Canva, and that includes how we interact with the world. We're based in Australia with offices and amazing team members all around the world, including the UK and Europe, the United States, the Philippines, and China. We've experienced enormous ongoing growth as a former startup. Our platform is used all around the world in 190 countries, more than 100 languages, with approximately 180 creations being made in Canva every second. Canva can be used to create just about anything, and we're actually going to give you a sneak peek into the whiteboarding feature in Canva during our session today, and that will also be in your take-home workbook. So on that note, the suspense is over. I'm going to hand over to Annie and Mike to take it from here. Mike, over to you.
Thanks so much, Erin. And again, thanks everyone for joining. We really are so excited. Today, our goal for you is that you will learn how to discover and effectively communicate your personal value proposition to help you land a really great job. So a bit of overview of our agenda. First, we're going to talk about how do you actually identify your PVP or your personal value proposition? How do you communicate your PVP? And then once you know how to communicate it, what are the platforms you can showcase your PVP? And then we'll talk through additional resources that we'll be giving you after that. Will answer some questions. So first up, I want to ask you guys a question, and this, I'd love your response in the comments. What is a personal value proposition? I know there's been a lot of confusion and questions already about this. If you know, I'd love to hear your answer on what you think a personal value proposition is. Maybe you've developed one before, maybe you feel comfortable even sharing that in the comments. And I'd love to see those pop through. Just drop in a comment when you get a chance, and I will address this as well in a minute. I see some comments in here that I can't read in your language. What is unique about your product? Yeah, there's some great answers there. Fantastic. A PVP really is a concept or a theme. And the reason why we want to share this is because it's not just an additional tool you put in with the application process. Really, your personal value proposition is what underpins and how you communicate your value through a variety of different ways. So through your CV is formed out of your personal proposition. Your cover letter is formed from your PVP, your LinkedIn profile, and then how you talk about yourself in an interview, as well as how you pitch yourself if you're just meeting people at a networking event or even at a more casual social event. So I would define your PVP as how you communicate the unique magic that is you and why that's relevant to the audience you're speaking to. So a well-defined PVP should solve a problem. It should speak to the unique impact that you bring, and it should authentically represent you. And really quickly, I wanted to take a moment to recognize that, we're speaking to people all over the globe, and there's been extremely difficult circumstances, and job hunting isn't easy at the best of times. It can be quite taxing. It can be quite, hit your confidence as well. So the first thing we want you to understand is your own value. Your value is the foundation that you need. So we don't want you to lose belief in your own value. Don't lose your confidence and don't be discouraged. The value that you have as a human is more than a candidate. It's more than a staff member or a worker. It's immeasurable. And through the job seeking process, you need to keep that foundation strong. I'm going to hand over to Annie, who's going to continue on with how you identify your PVP.
Thanks so much, Mike. And thank you to everyone for having us today. I'm really excited that you joined us to talk about such an important topic. So we'd love to move on with another interactive quiz or your perspective on how you would go about starting to identify what your personal value proposition is. So we'd love to see some answers in the chat again. Does anyone have any ideas? Where would you start if you wanted to kind of start thinking not about your resume, not about your cover letter, but about the concept that you can use to underpin it? Yep. It's great, Olia, definitely. Listing your skills out. Awesome. So to simplify it and to kind of start giving you a framework to go about identifying your personal value proposition, skills is definitely one key pillar out of what we've kind of summarized into 5 key pillars. So Olia, you definitely got the conversation started with the first and probably one of the most important in terms of thinking about the professional value that you have to add. So your skills could be learned tasks and expertise. And, for example, if you're a software developer, that could be coding in Python. But definitely also list out your soft skills, which at Canva we call power skills, because really, they're very holistically bringing themselves to work, and they might be doing a job through hard skills like coding in Python or coding in Java. But it's just as important that you're able to communicate your ideas. So think about where your strengths lie around areas like public speaking. It could be that you're highly creative, you're very analytical, and you like to solve hard problems. It could be that you are great at coaching others, you're very empathetic. So start to unpack that first pillar, and then think about where those skills have applied through the second pillar, which is your experience. And this can be your personal and professional experience, your academic experience. It doesn't just have to be where you've had full-time or part-time jobs, but that's definitely part of it. Think about any internships you have. So if you're just coming out of university and entering the workforce, have you done any volunteering work? I'm sure the power of community all around the world really is a common language. And I think when I'm speaking to candidates, if I know that someone's kind of brought their skills to work, but they've also had experience, volunteering for certain organizations, or they wrote their PhD and defended a dissertation on something that may not be coming into their everyday work, but is truly foundational to how they've built their experience, that's a really important part of their value proposition. So have a think holistically about what your experience looks like, and then make sure as well that you're mapping out your values. So this is the third pillar in this framework. And this is really where you can start to think about what is your personal set of guiding beliefs. So it might be things like integrity, honesty, family. So thinking about how you might want to manifest these in your everyday work and what you bring to an organization. You might be a coach who really values family and balance. And so you bring trust to your teams and make sure that everyone is able to do the best work of their lives while still really maintaining those family ties and having that work-life balance. So always be thinking about examples of where you've lived these skills, these experience, and these values, both in and outside of work. The fourth pillar is to unpack your passions. So who you are in and out of work is important across all of these pillars, but what kind of drives you? What are the things that get you going and inspire you to do amazing things? So if you're a nurse, is it that you love to help others? Why are you a software developer? Is it because you really love computers, or you found a really creative way to take super strong skills in mathematics or engineering and apply it to building software that people know and love? You might be a product manager really passionate about motion graphics outside of your work as well, but you're not actually building products that are in any way related to motion graphics. But that's not to say that, you should really be unpacking these passions, because one day you might be looking at a product manager job at a company that builds computer games. Finally, definitely thinking about your motivations is crucial. So what gets you out of bed in the morning, and what are the forces that initiate, guide, and really maintain your ability to remain goal-oriented and that motivate you to achieve goals? So, it could be as simple, I think probably everyone, if you started to map it out and started small, it would be making money to provide for your family. Why do we all go to work? There's definitely an economic exchange there, but think as well about kind of what really excites you. When are you demotivated as well? Sometimes knowing when you're not motivated or what you're not passionate about or what your values are not is just as important as mapping out what they are, and can help guide your thinking. So think about that in terms of why you do what you do, but also the styles of working. Do you like to be working independently? Are you really great in teams because you love bouncing your ideas off of others? Are you motivated by environments where you're required to speak publicly all the time? Maybe not. Maybe you really love to have a chance to consolidate your thoughts into the written form, or as we love to do at Canva, visually communicate concepts. So think about whether you're sort of independent, creative, analytical, and then think as well about what motivates you at a high level. So you might go to work every day, you're a nurse, you love helping people, but you also love driving outcomes in a not-for-profit hospital, for example. So a PVP is really, there's no right or wrong answer, but unpacking it is made a lot easier, and it can really inform the story that you're telling to prospective employers if you think about it across these 5 kind of key areas first. Ultimately, what you want to come back to, though, so after you map all of these things out, you really want to be able to see all of these details and see a theme that helps you work through solving a business need. So thinking about a business problem or a market need in your industry, in terms of how this actually applies to your job search, we'll go back to the example of nurses. Nurses enjoy helping people, engineers like to build, recruiters like to make connections, but why does that matter? I think if I were to provide, if I take a step back from my day-to-day role, which is recruiting for Canva, I really believe that you can see the quality of the people and the team dynamics in the quality of a product. So I really believe in the work that I get to do in making connections between people who are aligned to the motivations and the values of this company and the result that that has on the impact we can make through our product.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thanks.
So back over to you, Mike.
Cheers. So great points there, Annie, on, those pillars to identify your PVP. Some of the way that you can actually go about identifying those pillars is by asking insightful questions. So here's some questions that you should ask if you want to identify your PVP. First one would be, what are my personal skills and strengths? What problems am I uniquely good at solving? What are the biggest needs in my market or industry? And what are my drivers and motivators? And what are my core values? So, for example, if I was to go through these questions and ask myself those questions, if I were to say, what are my personal skills and strengths? For me, probably building relationships and communications is one of my strengths. Then problem solving, what am I uniquely good at solving? I'd say I'm probably fairly uniquely good at solving problems of connecting people to businesses where there is needs, where there is commercial outcomes, and they need unique talent to fill those needs. If we look at what are the biggest needs in the market in my industry, definitely in the software space and the scale up and startup space, the war for talent is real. So having recruiters that can make those connections is a massive need in our industry. What are my key drivers and motivators? I'm really driven personally by helping people, but making a positive impact in people's lives. I really want to help people enjoy their life more and enjoy their work more. And part of my core values are about, being a force for good. So if I was to craft my PVP, that's how I'd be doing it, by answering those questions. So if you have a look at this Venn diagram here, your PVP really should sit in that sweet spot in between, what do you offer? And that includes, your skills, experiences, everything that you are and what you offer. But then also, what does the market need? And then what motivates you? It can be rare sometimes to find that perfect combination that fits all three in a job title. But, for example, if we just talk about areas where that might not have happened. For me, in high school, I wanted to be a famous musician, a professional musician, and travel the globe playing with my band. We had a little band at high school. But if we look at, what does the market need? The market doesn't need another B grade high school band trying to make it. So if I look at what motivates me, I didn't have enough motivation or dedication to become a world-class musician. I had a little bit of skill, but not the motivation to take it to the next level. And if I look at, what I had to offer something that was, okay, and it's still a great hobby. I love playing music, but it didn't fit within that sweet spot of the PVP. So if we want to talk about unpacking your PVP further, it can be a bit tricky, but we've got some tools that we really want to help you to be able to do that. And that's with this interactive workbook, as was already mentioned. We're going to be sharing that with you, and that'll go through those kind of questions that you can ask yourself, give you a chance to reflect on those questions, dive a bit deeper into being authentic, into who you are. And we've even got a section there where you can do some videoing and record yourself for that, because while in discovering a PVP, I think you should definitely start by writing it out, jotting it out in its full form, and then do a condensed version, but then practice videoing yourself, because when you get put on the spot and maybe you're in an interview and the interviewer asks you, so tell me about yourself, that's really when it's your time to shine, to launch into your personal value proposition, or you could call it an elevator pitch, to tell them about yourself. Nerves often get the best of people. Annie, I'm sure you see it. I see it, all of our team, we interview people every day, and some people are exceptionally great candidates, but nerves get the best of them and they don't communicate very well in that first 2 minutes of an interview. That really can harm your chance of putting your best foot forward. So I encourage you to turn on the video camera, even just on your phone, and record yourself and practice it till you can get it sounding natural, because that puts a bit of pressure on you. All right, so I'll hand over to Annie for communicating your PVP.
Thanks, Mike. And definitely echoing what you said, I think being in a position where I'm interviewing people every day, I always feel, and rightly so, you should always feel like you're going into an interview and interviewing the company as well. I definitely get nervous sometimes and feel like I'm being interviewed. There are some really impressive people that we meet, and I'm sure many of you are, going to be those people for the companies that you're applying for jobs with. And I think I should probably add as well that in my own job search, it's always hard to kind of take a step back and look at your own experience and your own CV. If you're hiring for your teams, I'm sure you can attest to the fact that it's very different when you're hiring someone else to when you're thinking about sort of pitching your own value. So back to the importance of communicating your PVP. I saw a comment in the chat from, I think it's Elena, who said, how much profit can your work bring to the company? I think that's one way to look at it, definitely. And I think what I like about that is that you're coming back to a concept that you can see on this slide, which is about quantifying your achievements. So, you might not necessarily be working for a for-profit company. You actually might be working for a not-for-profit company, but really it's kind of thinking about that return on investment. So what is the value that you're driving? What is the investment that a company is making into you? And what is the investment of your time? And then what outcome or impact does that have? So whether that's goals or metrics related to driving revenue or profitability, or whether that's, I'll go back to the nurses example again, whether that's the number of lives you've saved or the number of meals you've delivered through the funds that you've raised. You just really want to kind of be able to think about why your work has mattered, and then and also what the goals have been in each one of the either professional or educational experiences you've had, or volunteering pieces of work that you've done. Think about your achievements and why they've mattered, and what the kind of metrics were that tell you that they did matter in the first place. The world also loves data, and I'm sure many of you can speak to that. Also, I've seen that a couple of people in the chat are designers. So thinking about kind of how you take a quantitative approach to mapping out your achievements. Mike mentioned before that he's going to be sharing the workbook after this webinar, and in it we have Canva's awesome whiteboarding tools. So this is also a really good way to kind of see key themes and map out the goals and kind of how the work that you've done has had an impact against those goals. So it doesn't just all have to be data and numbers. It can also be thinking a bit more broadly than that. The second piece, of course, and we mentioned this before, but your personal value proposition should really align to business needs, and try and think of your PVP as just related to one job or one business. Try and think about it more broadly and map it out. You can tailor it to a business need depending on the company that you're looking for. But as long as you have this kind of strong foundational pillar and you understand what your value is in the work that you do based on your skills, your experience, your values, your motivations, and the 5 pillars we discussed before, it'll be much easier for you to really hyper target the companies that you're speaking to. So think of it on a more macro level, and then get more focused before every interview or before any meetups that you're going to. Third piece is definitely maintaining authenticity. So I definitely think that the best interviews that I've had are when I can really kind of see what it might be like to work with someone. And that's because they bring themselves into the conversation. Nothing feels scripted. Of course, I think we all do our best work preparing, and we do the best we can to have some great points ready to go. It's not bad to come in with a list and you put together a resume that has bullet points on the quantified achievements that align to the value you can drive for a business. But not sounding scripted, and actually, if you get a tough question, being okay to take a step back and say, let me think about that for a second, and then actually come up with a solution on the fly or something a little bit more creative, or even just to say, I'm not sure, actually would like to go away and do my research and come back to you. That shows authenticity in who you are, and also some really important traits that all businesses are looking for, which is strong ability to kind of to bring your whole self to work. And also it means that you'll be more open and honest in the workplace, which I think in such a collaborative world, we all really need to be successful. Cool. So I've gone one slide too far. Great. So in terms of quantifying your achievements, I'll expand a little bit more on what we just saw before. So when you're unpacking this, and this is the stuff that you can really start to think about as strong examples to bring to interviews, to put in cover letters or your motivation letters. It can be points to touch on when you go to a local meetup in the city that you're living in, or something to put in your resume. So what to include is going to always want to draw back to value, right? So think return on investment, quantifiable data. So the impact of a project you led or were involved in. For example, did you manage a project to deliver in under budget or ahead of the time frame? And what was your role? Were you an individual contributor, or were you part of a team? Were you coaching on leading others? And if you focus on metrics and really positive return on investment on topics like, for example, budgets or people, time to deliver, or let's say you have goals around net promoter scores, that is really where you kind of show value and give credibility to your achievements. And it also provides clarity to hiring managers, hiring teams, recruiting teams who are trying to understand the impact that you can bring. So in terms of your focus on metrics, I would also say that you should think macro. So using this data will help your CV stand out in a crowd for sure. And it will also mean that you've had a more meaningful conversation with a business or a person you're connecting with, because they'll understand, like they haven't gone to work with you every single day before you've had this conversation or before they've reviewed your CV. So it helps them kind of build that context and understand you a bit more. But I'd also say consider the metrics beyond the sort of day-to-day in the project. So for example, if you're a designer and you had to produce designs for a certain feature where you moved a button from one of the checkout flow to another, don't leave it at that. Talk about what that actually drove in terms of growth in monthly active users, or what else did you create and drive more maturity around experimentation and A/B testing? And so you were actually using data-driven design to help achieve these broader business outcomes. So yeah, think sort of day-to-day goals and also the broad impact around you that you would have had. And this here is just an example. I mean, again, there's no right or wrong way to put together your achievements on a resume or in your LinkedIn profile, but this is just an example that I think really speaks to me, because if I'm reading it, and I hope you can see this as well, and that it's big enough, but we can see here that this person was directly responsible for a team, but also grew a team. And so I can see that they've hired. And why did they hire? They were launching a new hybrid direct and indirect model for their sales, so they could expand into new territories. And then you can really sort of, to use the expression, move the needle. You can really see how they've moved the needle on budget. So they've grown as a result of that channel revenue from 0 to 8 million. So again, very much speaks to, I think, their soft skills or power skills, as we call them, as well as their sort of hard sales skills and people leadership or revenue generation or sales. And back over to Mike, who's going to speak a little bit more about what we mean when we're talking about the PVP, going back to business needs.
Awesome. Thanks, Annie. Yeah, great points there. I think, and I saw some questions in the chat too, which is brilliant, just about, how do you find out what the needs of the business are? And I'd invite Annie as well to give you 2 cents here, but I think research is definitely the best way to find out what the needs of the business are. Research the company, look at news articles, look at LinkedIn, look at any kind of business publications, news articles that are talking about broad industry needs. But another really great way to find some of those insights, those key pain points, is to talk to someone in the company. If you know a friend or a family member or a connection on LinkedIn, just ask them that question of what are the big pain points in your company or in your industry right now. So you want to definitely align your PVP with those business needs, because that way when you're talking with someone, maybe in a networking meeting or an interview, you're giving your pitch about who you are and the problems that you solve. You're making the other person who's listening to that thinking, oh, this is exactly what we need. I have these massive problems right now and they're keeping me awake. And you are telling me right now that you can solve all of these problems. It's the best way to leave them super impressed and leave them just super desperate to get you on board. So when you're talking about your PVP, it's not just about you. It's not just about who you are. It's also about what you can do, the impact you can have. So you want to ask yourself this question: why should they care? Whether it's someone at a barbecue, whether it's someone in a networking event, whether it's someone who's interviewing you, why should they care about who you are and what you do? Why is it relevant to them? So it is your responsibility to show the employer the connection. Don't leave it to them to figure it out themselves. If you know you're meeting a hiring manager or you're meeting a recruiter for the first time, or you've got a phone call coming up, then definitely that's the time you should be doing the research, find out what those pain points are, so that when they ask you to tell me about yourself, then you've got a clear answer that connects the dots for them. And, you can even be pretty forward in that and say, look, I know that right now you're lacking back-end engineers because, you've got a product that needs to get developed really quickly to meet with the investor's timeline. I'm an amazing back-end engineer and I know the same technology that you have, so I can bring a lot of value in that area. You want to be ready to meet that gap, to fill that in straight away. If you're going to an industry meetup, same thing. I would encourage you to research the kind of companies, the kind of industry that you're going to. What are those pain points? What are people looking for when they're going there? Usually at meetups, they're going for some kind of reason, to connect with certain kind of people for some reason. And on the flip side of that, so I've talked a lot about, meeting the business need and filling that gap. I do want to preface that in saying, that doesn't mean you should be a shapeshifter and just try and be all things to all men. That's not going to go well for you. You need to be authentic. You need to showcase who you genuinely are and show your personality. So while we're talking about meeting business needs, don't try and, in that example of the back-end engineer, don't try and say you're the world's best JavaScript front-end developer if your expertise is in the back-end. Stick to what you really know, who you really are, and be authentic. Show up and show who you really are. So how and why should you maintain authenticity? And I wanted to flag, this content will be in the deck we'll give you, so I'm not going to go in detail into all of these. But how to be authentic. Preparation is key, especially if you are new to developing your personal value proposition, which it sounds like a lot of you guys are. It's a super important thing to do because it'll help you in so many different areas. But be authentic with how you present that. You don't want to sound like you're reading out a script, or you don't want to have a script of this is my PVP. So when the recruiter asks, tell me about yourself, you just read off a script. That's not really authentic. You want to know who you are well enough and be able to communicate it well enough to just speak off the cuff about it and make it feel natural. You want to relax yourself, try and calm your nerves. And why you want to be authentic is because you want to be hired for who you really are. You don't want to be hired because of some act you put on in an interview and then they get to realize you're actually not who they thought you were going to be and causes all the troubles. But also, employees are placing a huge emphasis on soft skills for roles at the moment. So being able to communicate with authenticity, showcase your personality, speak with empathy is a great way to do that. I'll hand over to Annie for showcasing your PVP.
Thanks, Mike. So some great questions in the chat, and I just want to make sure I'm speaking to them in the next slide. So I guess what we're going to cover next is, now that you've identified your PVP and let's say you've gotten it into written form on your CV or your resume or your portfolio, you want to kind of make yourself discoverable online, and that's going to amplify your value proposition and kind of your personal brand as well, which we'll speak to later. LinkedIn is a great place to start, but I guess we also want to speak to the fact that many of you're all around the world. I love seeing all the different places that you're living show up, and I'm sure that there are many different online and offline channels that present great opportunities to showcase who you are and the value you can provide. Again, LinkedIn is a great place to start. I think just want to go back to Tatiana's question about giving a few examples of people who are not in a sales or related team and thinking like analytics or accounting. Totally hear you on that. And the reason we've used some of these examples around sales is just for the purposes of driving kind of like, lightweight. It's sometimes sales is easy to kind of say we've gone from maybe not easy, but 0 to 8 million in revenue. But I actually think that as a recruiter, and I spent quite a long time recruiting globally for analytics positions, that data. So if you think about how analytics teams operate, ultimately they're trying to create actionable insights that empower other teams. So this is where, again, your day-to-day role should speak to in how you communicate why your skills and experience have driven value. Think about the goals that you were working towards. It might have been that you created, I don't know, let's say you deployed Tableau, and that as a result created a platform where you could have a centralized source of dashboards for marketing teams to better measure their spend on paid channels. Really provide that color. Like, why? Think about who your work impacted in your immediate team. Did you up-level a more junior analyst? Did you have a finance analyst who had more of a tax background? I'm not in finance, so this is probably going to be an example with a margin for error. But let's say you are the tax expert and you understand international tax, and you brought that skill set into the company. Why did that matter? Maybe it helped a company expand in 3 or 4 other regions. So just wanted to touch on that before kind of going into these showcasing of channels. But these standing out on the channels that matter is so important, because once you've unpacked these like quantifiable achievements that, again, don't have to be related at all back to profit or revenue, it's a great place to also start to network yourself in networks where other people understand your experience. So think about your audience. You might be looking for jobs at a software company, and you're going to have software developers, or let's say the CTO of a startup. They might go first to your, sorry, I'm just going to jump back a slide. They might actually start with your GitHub profile. They might want to see what you've contributed to in terms of open source projects, and the ones that you've chosen might speak to the technology you're passionate about. You might have, built an open source piece of software with a group of other engineers around the world that has a specific impact on a problem that you're really passionate about solving. Go into Stack Overflow. Let's, again, think about software engineering. You can contribute to topics. You can sort of show what you care about. And it's also a great place to find jobs. If you're a designer, get your portfolio ready to showcase on Dribbble or Behance. You might connect with someone who isn't a hiring manager, but just really likes your work and thinks it looks great, or invites you along to a meetup. And that could lead to a job or a new connection. If you're in analytics, there are tons of Slack channels out there, global Slack channels for people who want to exchange ideas about, let's say, A/B testing, or whether new BI tools, new ways of running. Again, sort of flying on the seat of my pants here, but Slack and the channels that are associated with skills or industry specific groups is a great way to make those connections. And you're actually talking about your ideas. So you're not just relying on a publicly facing profile or a resume you're submitting to a company. You're actually sort of getting to learn yourself and grow from others while also contributing back to a community. So think of those as all opportunities just as much as they might be appealing to your interests. Quora, same thing. Upwork, Fiverr, if you have any freelance work, definitely reference and create really great profiles on any channels that speak to the value that you've added to in your personal or professional experience. And this is following on from the last slide, but let's say you are a couple of years out from doing your PhD. Are there any research groups, or what are the local universities in the city that you live in? And there are tons of sort of free events and meetups where you can go and sort of just exchange ideas and network, read the local news, see what startups have just gotten investment, and then jump on their careers pages and see how they're hiring. Definitely, again, I've just spoken to online communities, but think borderless too. We're in such a remote friendly workforce and across the world now that Online communities can be a really great way to find remote work, or let's say you've moved to Glasgow, but you find a great job in Edinburgh, that you can still use those online communities to sort of establish those broader networks and communicate your value and showcase it along the way. Awesome. Whoop. But definitely coming back to, sorry everyone for the fumble on the remote control here. So coming back to LinkedIn, which is definitely probably the single biggest way to be discovered right here and right now, make it attractive to hiring teams. Again, thinking about your audience, depending on the company that you're applying for, it might be the founder and CEO, because they might be a few people. That it might be at Canva, a recruiting team who focuses on a specialist area. But ultimately, you want to think of this as a place where you can create a really great summary and intro of your career. Again, always using your PVP as a great foundation, and use it as a way to be short, sharp, and packed with your personal value right from the outset. So it's very visually engaging, and you have an opportunity, and we'll show you an example in a second, but you have the opportunity to kind of showcase your content. You have a narrative that can that people will see straight away when they jump onto your profile. But ultimately, this shouldn't be too different from your CV, but basically just you want to generalize it a bit more, because your CV is an opportunity for you to be hyper targeted to any companies that you're applying for. Whereas again, you might have multiple audiences picking up on your skills and experience when they jump onto your LinkedIn profile. The one other thing I wanted to add here is that LinkedIn has a really great featured section with rich media, and that is another good way to showcase what you care about. Work, articles, posts that demonstrate your credibility and expertise in your field. You can also follow other thought leaders. So let's say you are in finance and you really admire the CFO of Netflix. You can follow that person and see the content that they post, repost it yourself, save it, comment on it. Another great way to learn yourself while you're showcasing what you care about, and also keeping tabs on what's happening in the industry, which ultimately helps you gain confidence on what your own value is. And this is, we've actually chosen our trusty global head of people at Canva, Jenny Rogerson, to show you. Again, no right or wrong way to do this. Jenny is, if you look at mine, it's nowhere near as complete as this, but Jenny is really taking advantage of the very rich features on LinkedIn. The other thing is that she is very engaged and follows lots of different people who are thought leaders in the industry that live all over the world. And you know, I've jumped onto her profile and just creating this little screen grab and seen a couple of people that I've started following. I can really see what she cares about. It's been a great way for me to, like, if I were preparing for an interview at Canva and Jenny was interviewing me, it'd be a great way for me to learn more about some of the points that I might want to touch on with my own value proposition that will speak to her, of course, doing that authentically. And also, it's if you want to do this for your own profile, make sure that you're not afraid to ask people for recommendations. I think that really speaks, they might actually support you by writing recommendations on your profile. If you jump onto Jenny's, you can see she's got quite a few and given quite a few as well. But the people in your networks, if you ask them to write you a recommendation because you worked on a project together that went really well, they might touch on parts of the value that you've delivered that you haven't even mapped out as identifying your personal value proposition. Over to you, Mike.
Awesome. Thanks, Annie. One LinkedIn profile to another LinkedIn profile. We have blanked out the name here, as you can see, but have a look at this LinkedIn profile and let me ask you a question. And I want to hear answers again in the chat. One is to be a bit interactive. Who would you want to engage with more? This second profile here, which is an IT recruiter, someone in Sydney, you can't see their name, or Jenny, the head of people at Canva. Besides the title of where they work, which profile would you be more likely to connect? If you had 2 connection requests sitting in your LinkedIn notifications, would you connect with one? Would you ignore the other? Who would you be more interested in building an actual relationship and connection with? And I'll show you one more candidate as well here. Again, we've blanked out the name, but this is a customer success leader who's got quite a fleshed out profile here compared to this profile. Seeing some definite answers come in there. Jenny's definitely a winner. Even if we were to compare number 2 and number 3 here, you can't see this person's profile name either because we've blocked that out, but a customer success leader. It's in pretty stark contrast with number 2. If we look at this profile, there's no photo, no banner, no little skills section, no bio, no info under the way they've worked. You can see where they've got education. It's got basically the bare bones that you need to have on a LinkedIn profile. And if that's you, no shame on that at all. But if we want to really stand out in the job seeking market, having a well thought out, well fleshed out CV is having a LinkedIn, sorry, not CV, is really important because I don't know, 90% of the time I'm reviewing candidates, I'm looking at their LinkedIn as well as their CV to get a better feel for who they actually are. So, Annie shared about some of the key things that really make a great LinkedIn profile. So I encourage you to think about that because it all ties into what your personal brand is on social media. I know some people, when they hear the word personal brand, they cringe a little bit and they think, oh, someone's just trying to become famous or someone's trying to become an Instagram influencer. That's really not what personal brand is at all. If you think about personal brand in a simple form, it's kind of an association. What do people think about when they think about you? What do they associate with you? What are you the go-to person for, in another way to say it? We've kind of categorized personal brand as the qualities, characteristics, and values that you express on your profile and the content you post and share and interact with. So your profile is your story. We really encourage you to make it yours and control the narrative. We've already covered the basics on how to do that over LinkedIn. But once you've covered the basics, a great way to step forward is to start by posting content. Now, I'm a huge advocate for producing, posting, publishing content publicly on LinkedIn and other platforms, because for me, I've seen huge amount of growth in my own professional life, in my own personal life, and I've seen exponential reach, I guess, of what I'm trying to do by producing content. Quick little side note, I used to be an agency recruiter, and I'd sometimes post videos saying, hey, I'm looking for a front-end developer. And I would get these messages on LinkedIn, not from front-end developers, but from new clients saying, oh, I saw you looking for a front-end developer. We're actually looking for a social media manager. And I win new clients. So I hate sales. I hate business development. So for me, it was the no-brainer. Producing content just puts you front of mind for people. So what does that look like? What kind of content should you produce? Can you produce? I definitely encourage you to push yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit. Write a blog, write an article on LinkedIn. It's super easy. When you go to post a post on LinkedIn, you can turn it into a blog with just a couple of paragraphs. Do tutorial videos, whatever your expertise is. Make some content around that. Again, I encourage you to do a video. Video has better than normal cut through. The algorithms love video at the moment. You can do a portfolio update. If you're a designer, share your portfolio, share a video of you kind of scrolling through your portfolio. Social media posts showcasing your work, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter are actually becoming much more common B2B places where you can really showcase your skills in those markets as well, not just in LinkedIn. And I'll hand over to Annie, who's going to talk some more about content.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so for those of you who are like me, and I hope I don't lose anyone when I say this, but if you're not a content creator, which I'm not, then fear not. You don't have to be. It doesn't mean that you can't showcase or communicate your PVP, but you can definitely start to sort of build your profile and one step at a time really engage with the communities that matter to you. So public forums like Stack Overflow, which I mentioned earlier for, let's say technology focused folks, or Quora, just to ask any questions. I mean, I've seen questions on there about what interview questions has Facebook asked in this job. Probably shouldn't be giving that away, but that is the beauty of the open source world that we live in, is that there is so much space to start to interact with other content that can help you. And in the process, you'll probably be helping others as well. So maybe comment on some of your favorite industry leaders posts, or if you see Mike post something that really speaks to you, give it a like and repost. This is not a personal plug for Mike, but I'm sure like he's got some really great content on looking for a job. So if you see anyone, let's say it's Sheryl Sandberg and you love some of her, the work that she's done to build teams, then like it, comment, interact with it, see other people liking, commenting, posting, and you're curious about their profiles, and you start doing they're posting other great articles. So just start interacting. It doesn't necessarily need to be created by you, but you can still contribute to your personal brand by sharing and voicing your opinion on a topic when you feel compelled to do so. And again, coming back to those 5 pillars that you use to identify your personal value proposition: think skills, think experience, think your passions, your motivations, and just all of the drivers that get you out of bed in the morning to do the work that you do. Yeah, in terms of your content and actually creating it down the line, once you start building your personal brand, you might actually start creating more, whether it's YouTube content or whether you're hosting a webinar and it's posted and it's online on YouTube, make sure you add that to your profile on whatever channel is going to be most relevant to your current and future career prospects. So we are at the end of our presentation. So we just wanted to say a huge thank you once again, but we're going to get to a few more questions. And then Mike just is going to recap some of the resources that are available to you after the session.
Awesome. Thanks, Annie. Yeah, so I flagged this already. This resource that we'll email out to you all, there's got a couple of different sections in there recapping some of the content that we went over. But there's a section here for you to really get interactive with the whiteboard feature in Canva, jot down some notes, some rough notes, and then write out a more refined PVP and then practice it by videoing yourself until you feel like it's natural. I'd encourage you too to share it with someone, ask a friend or family if you can kind of pitch your PVP to them. But let's jump into some of the questions. Maybe I'll ask you this one, Annie. What do you base your PVP on if you have no experience or have just graduated?
Yes, I remember this well. You have so much to offer. The world is your oyster. You are a blank slate, and you probably are, in many ways, I'm completely assuming here because I don't know, anything about the person who's asked this question. But I think if I were speaking to someone who had just graduated, number one, you've got a degree, you have clearly an interest in some sort of area that you've studied. And I'm sure whether it's university or you've graduated from high school or your master's, I'm sure that you've been super involved in whether it's sports or any volunteering groups, or maybe you host you're on the university newspaper and you write articles for them, but you've just studied math. So really unpack, like, those are skills and experience that you're bringing into any role. But this is where the piece around your passions and your motivations and your, I suppose, what gets you out of bed in the morning or how you want to work is really powerful as well. You might not have, everyone asks the question, how do you get a job that requires you to have 2 years of experience if no job, if you don't have any experience? But this is where you have to sort of overcome a bit of imposter syndrome and actually just say to yourself, I have an opportunity to make really deliberate choices about the kind of work that I want to be doing. And the way that you can be confident, or as confident as possible, that you are, aligning to your values and starting your career off on a great foot is by unpacking your personal value proposition. And that'll give you the confidence as well to have to think outside of the box. So no, you don't have, let's say you haven't worked in a software engineering team before, but maybe you have contributed to a whole bunch of open source projects, or maybe you've built a computer game. I know we're using a lot of technology centric examples here, but please remember that every single field, you will have something to bring and something to showcase the value that you've added, whether or not you've got experience in the workforce yet. So I hope that helps. But yeah, also be very choosy, and you have to do even more research. I hate to say it, but you have to do even more research than others, because you may not have recruiters sort of approaching you as much about graduate roles. But if you will impress a hiring team if you're able to come to the table with good working knowledge of how they operate, how they hire, based on any research that you can do on their careers page, or reading news about their growth. That you can really set yourself apart by just going that extra mile.
Awesome. Great answer. I'll answer this one. Is a PVP mandatory? Hopefully we've answered that. Definitely not. You can go into the job seeking process and just spit out a CV, have a LinkedIn profile. But what I found is the candidates who do the best, they have a firm understanding of who they are, and they're consistent across that, all the different channels that you see in the application process, through their CV, their LinkedIn, meeting them in person. It's all really connected. It's all authentic. It's consistent. Annie, I'm sure you see this, and the rest of our team would see this too. Sometimes you look at a CV and you click on the LinkedIn, and it's almost like it's a completely different person. For me, that raises huge red flags and question marks, and there's no consistency. And it feels like they're just trying to get any job that they desperately can. Having a PVP will make it feel more authentic and more genuine in your desire to get that certain job. And Annie, maybe the last question for you: what's the difference between a PVP motivational letter and a cover letter?
Okay, so I might show my ignorance here, but I actually had to Google what a motivation letter is and how that's different to a cover letter. So if you're applying for a job at Canva, you definitely do not have to do a motivation letter, but ultimately you can think of your PVP. This is in the workbook, but going back to the slide at the beginning, in fact, Mike, do you want to just jump back to that slide about the, where we've got our explanation of what is a PVP? I think it's slide 12. Yeah, awesome. So your cover letter, motivation letter, resume, LinkedIn profile, they're actually all being built on top of your personal value proposition. So again, not mandatory, but definitely gives some roots to all of these different channels that you might have to communicate in, and make sure that you have some consistency in your story across them. If you've done the work to map out your personal value proposition, you will have, your resume won't read super, super differently to what's on your LinkedIn or in your cover letter. Like, it won't have a completely different tone of voice. You can tweak it and tailor it. But ultimately they should have all these foundations and the roots, like who are you is your personal value position. And then, the why is your PVP, and the what is your CV, your cover letter, your motivation letter, and so on.
Awesome. Well, look, we are so glad that you joined us. Thank you so much for sticking around. We do have more webinars coming up. So next one is how to do video cover letters. And then after that will be mastering your job search, and then tips to ace your job interview. Again, huge thanks. We really do appreciate you sticking around. We've loved being a part of this with you, and we'll see you for the next one.
Mike and Annie, thank you so much for the incredible webinar. I've been reading the comments. They're all very, very nice. Thank you all for joining as well. Please feel free to share your emotions, your thoughts on the webinar. We will stick around for just 1 more minute, so you do have the time to write that. І ще раз скажу українською мовою, що якщо ви хочете поділитися своїми враженнями, будь ласка, зробіть це, напишіть нам, скажіть, чи сподобався вам вебінар, що вам було корисно. І ми зачекаємо трішки, і вже будемо чекати на вас наступного разу. Дякую вам всім велике. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.